Have you ever wondered what happens when you dive deep into the twisted, chaotic universe of Family Guy, while your brain is winding down for sleep? Tonight, we're going on a journey through the most bizarre, darkest, and surprisingly complex lore hidden beneath the surface of Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece. From alternate realities to character deaths that actually matter, from time travel paradoxes to the secret history of Quahog itself, this is going to be the most comprehensive exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths you've ever experienced. But before we begin our descent into this animated rabbit hole, let me warn you. What you're about to discover might change how you see those seemingly random cutaway gags forever. Because underneath all that crude humor and pop culture references lies a narrative so intricate and dark that it makes other animated series look like children's picture books. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and prepare to have your mind blown as we uncover the secret lore of Family Guy that most viewers never notice. Our story begins not with the Griffins we know today, but with a question that haunts every longtime viewer. How many times has this family actually died? The answer is more disturbing than you might think. Throughout the series, we've witnessed multiple universe resets, character resurrections, and timeline manipulations that suggest something far more sinister is happening in Quahog than meets the eye. Let's start with Brian Griffin, whose death in Season 12 wasn't just a ratings stunt. It revealed something crucial about the Family Guy universe. When Brian was killed by a car, the emotional weight of his death felt different from the usual cartoon violence we're accustomed to. But here's where it gets interesting. His replacement, Vinny, wasn't just a random character. He represented a glimpse into what the show could become without its moral compass, its voice of reason in a house full of chaos. The fact that Stewie was able to travel back in time to save Brian tells us something profound about the nature of time itself in this universe. Time travel isn't just a plot device in Family Guy. It's a fundamental force that shapes reality. Stewie's time machine isn't just some random invention. It's connected to a larger cosmic framework that governs how this universe operates. Consider this. Every time we see Stewie travel through time, reality doesn't just change, it fractures. We're shown multiple timelines existing simultaneously, each one revealing different aspects of the Griffin family's true nature. In some timelines, Peter never met Lois. In others, Meg is the favorite child. These aren't just alternate realities for comedy, they're glimpses into the infinite possibilities that exist when time itself becomes malleable. But time travel is just the beginning of Family Guy's cosmic horror. Let's talk about the multiverse theory that runs through the entire series. The show has explicitly confirmed that multiple universes exist, each with their own version of the Griffin family. We've seen evil versions, dog versions, even versions where the family members have completely different personalities and life paths. This multiverse concept becomes even more disturbing when you realize that some episodes might not be taking place in the same universe we started with. That feeling you get when character personalities seem inconsistent or when major events are forgotten. It might not be lazy writing. It might be because we're actually watching a different universe entirely. The chicken fights between Peter and Ernie represent something deeper than just extended fight sequences. They're battles between order and chaos, between different philosophical approaches to existence. Ernie represents structure, routine, and the mundane aspects of daily life. Peter represents pure unrestrained desire, and the rejection of social norms. Their fights aren't just physical confrontations, they're metaphysical battles for the soul of their shared reality. Each chicken fight escalates in scope and destruction, suggesting that these conflicts are affecting the fundamental fabric of their universe. The level of destruction they cause should realistically end civilization as we know it, yet everything returns to normal afterwards. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence of reality itself being reset after each confrontation, maintaining the status quo through cosmic intervention. Now let's examine the true nature of Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire Family Guy universe. On the surface, he's a baby with advanced intelligence and homicidal tendencies. But dig deeper, and you'll find layers of psychological complexity that rival the greatest literary characters. Stewie's relationship with his sexuality isn't just character development. It represents the internal struggle between his intellectual advancement and his emotional immaturity. His confusion about his own identity reflects the broader theme of identity crisis that runs through the entire series. Every Griffin family member struggles with who they really are versus who they think they should be. His scientific inventions aren't just plot devices. They represent humanity's desire to control and manipulate reality itself. Stewie's time machine, his weather control device, his mind control technology, they're all attempts to impose order on a chaotic universe. But every time he uses these inventions, reality becomes more unstable, not less. The most disturbing aspect of Stewie's character is his relationship with Brian. Their friendship represents the only genuine emotional connection in the Griffin household, but it's also the most psychologically complex relationship in the series. Brian serves as both father figure and intellectual equal to Stewie, creating a dynamic that's simultaneously heartwarming and deeply troubling. Let's shift our focus to Meg Griffin, the most tragic character in the Family Guy universe. Her treatment by her family isn't just running gag. It's a systematic psychological experiment in how prolonged emotional abuse shapes personality development. Meg represents the scapegoat, the family member who absorbs all the dysfunction and toxicity so that the others can maintain their illusion of normalcy. But here's what most viewers miss. Meg isn't actually the weakest member of the Griffin family. She's the strongest. She endures constant psychological torture and emerges with her sanity relatively intact. In episodes where she finally snaps and fights back, we see glimpses of her true potential. She's not the victim. She's the survivor. The episodes where Meg temporarily gains popularity or success reveal something crucial about the Griffin family dynamic. They literally cannot function without having someone to blame and abuse. When Meg rises above her assigned role, the entire family structure begins to collapse. This suggests that their dysfunction isn't accidental. It's carefully maintained through deliberate psychological manipulation. Chris Griffin represents wasted potential and the tragedy of inherited dysfunction. His artistic abilities and occasional flashes of intelligence show us what he could become in a healthier environment. But he's trapped in a cycle of learned helplessness, modeled after his father's behavior patterns. Chris is what happens when natural talent is systematically crushed by family dysfunction. His relationship with his imaginary friend and his artistic pursuits aren't just character quirks. They're survival mechanisms, ways of maintaining some connection to his authentic self while navigating a family that demands conformity to their twisted value system. Peter Griffin himself is perhaps the most disturbing character when you really analyze his behavior patterns. He isn't just immature or irresponsible. He displays clear signs of multiple personality disorders, sociopathic tendencies, and complete lack of empathy for others. His actions regularly destroy lives, yet he never faces meaningful consequences. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence that Peter exists outside normal social and legal frameworks. He's protected by something larger than himself, some cosmic force that ensures his continued existence regardless of the chaos he creates. Peter Griffin isn't just a bad father and husband. He's an agent of chaos, a force of nature that exists to disrupt order and stability. His job history reveals something interesting about the economic reality of the Family Guy universe. He's worked for toy companies, television networks, and various other industries, often rising to positions of significant power despite his obvious incompetence. This suggests that the economic system itself is fundamentally broken, rewarding chaos and incompetence over skill and dedication. Lois Griffin's psychology is perhaps the most complex of all: the family members. She comes from wealth and privilege but chose to marry into dysfunction. This wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was a deliberate choice that reveals something dark about her character. Lois is addicted to drama and chaos. She could leave Peter at any time, but she stays because the dysfunction feeds something deep within her psyche. Her moments of extreme violence and rage aren't just comedy beats. They're glimpses into her true nature, carefully hidden beneath a facade of suburban respectability. Lois Pewterschmidt-Griffin is potentially the most dangerous member of the family because she understands manipulation and control in ways the others don't. Her relationship with her wealthy family reveals the broader class dynamics at play in the Family Guy universe. The Pewterschmidts represent old money, established power structures, and systematic oppression disguised as respectability. Lois chose to reject that world, but she brought its values and methods into her marriage, creating a toxic hybrid of working-class dysfunction and upper-class manipulation. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this story, and its history reveals disturbing truths about American society. Founded on violence and maintained through systematic corruption, Quahog represents every small American town that's slowly dying while pretending everything is fine. The local government is openly corrupt, the police force is incompetent, and the social structures are designed to maintain inequality and dysfunction. Mayor West's obvious mental illness and continued political power isn't just absurd humor. It's commentary on how democratic systems can be manipulated by charismatic figures who appeal to voters' worst impulses. His policies are destructive and nonsensical, yet he remains popular because he validates the community's desire to avoid responsibility for their own problems. The recurring characters in Quahog each represent different aspects of American social dysfunction. Cleveland represents the loyal friend who enables destructive behavior rather than confronting it. Joe represents the warrior mentality that struggles to adapt to civilian life. Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual predation disguised as humor. But it's the relationship between these characters that reveals the true horror of the Family Guy universe. They're all trapped in cycles of mutual enablement, each one preventing the others from growing or changing. Their friendships aren't based on genuine affection or shared values. They're based on mutual need for validation of their worst impulses. The show's treatment of religion reveals another layer of its complex worldview. Religion in Family Guy isn't just mocked or dismissed. It's shown to be another system of control and manipulation, used by both believers and non-believers to justify their behavior and avoid taking responsibility for their actions. The various religious figures who appear throughout the series are almost universally corrupt, hypocritical, or mentally unstable. This isn't anti-religious sentiment. It's commentary on how spiritual concepts can be twisted to serve earthly power structures. The show suggests that genuine spirituality might exist, but it's constantly corrupted by human weakness and desire for control over others. Death himself appears as a recurring character, and his portrayal reveals something profound about the show's philosophy regarding mortality and meaning. Death isn't portrayed as evil or frightening. He's shown as tired, overworked, and occasionally compassionate. This suggests that mortality isn't the enemy in the Family Guy universe. Meaninglessness is the real enemy. The various celebrity encounters throughout the series serve a specific narrative function beyond simple humor. They represent the collision between fantasy and reality, between the Griffin family's delusional self-image and the actual impact they have on the world. Most celebrities in Family Guy are either destroyed by their encounter with the Griffins or reveal themselves to be just as dysfunctional and hollow. This pattern suggests that fame and success in their universe don't actually solve fundamental human problems. The celebrities are just as trapped in cycles of self-destruction and meaninglessness as the regular characters. Success becomes another form of prison, another way to avoid confronting deeper truths about existence and purpose. The show's handling of social and political issues reveals a deeply cynical worldview disguised as mindless entertainment. Every political position is shown to be equally corrupt and self-serving. Every social movement is revealed to have ulterior motives. Every attempt at progress is ultimately futile because human nature itself is fundamentally flawed. But here's where it gets interesting. This cynicism isn't presented as the final word. It's presented as the starting point for authentic human connection. Only after accepting the futility of external solutions do the characters occasionally find moments of genuine love, friendship, and meaning. These moments are rare and usually brief, but they represent the show's true message about what makes life worth living. The darker episodes of Family Guy, the ones that deal with serious topics like domestic violence, addiction, and mental illness, aren't just tonal experiments. They're glimpses into the reality that exists beneath the cartoon violence and crude humor. These episodes suggest that everything we've been laughing at is actually a coping mechanism, a way of dealing with trauma and pain that's too intense to face directly. Stewie and Brian's road trip episodes reveal this most clearly. When these two characters are alone together, away from the family dysfunction, their conversations become deeper and more meaningful. They discuss philosophy, mortality, and the nature of existence itself. These aren't just character development moments. They're the show's way of exploring serious themes without the distraction of constant humor. The time travel episodes create a complex mythology around cause and effect, free will, and determinism. When Stewie changes the past, the consequences ripple through reality in ways that suggest everything is connected to everything else. Small changes create massive alterations in the timeline, implying that individual choices have far more impact than we typically realize. But here's the disturbing part. Despite all the timeline changes and alternate realities, certain core patterns remain constant. The Griffin family dysfunction persists across multiple universes and timelines. This suggests that some aspects of human nature are so fundamental that they transcend individual choice and circumstance. The episodes that focus on Brian's writing career reveal the show's commentary on creative expression and artistic integrity. Brian's struggle to balance commercial success with authentic expression mirrors the show's own position in the entertainment landscape. Family Guy itself exists in the tension between meaningful content and commercial viability, between artistic expression and market demands. His relationship with other writers and artists in the series shows how creative communities can become toxic environments where competition and ego destroy the collaborative spirit that should drive artistic endeavors. The literary world in Family Guy is portrayed as pretentious, shallow, and ultimately meaningless. Yet Brian continues to pursue it because the alternative is accepting that his life has no greater purpose. The show's portrayal of education and intellectual development is particularly dark. Smart characters like Brian and Stewie are often shown to be more miserable than their less intelligent family members. Knowledge and awareness don't lead to happiness or fulfillment. They lead to greater understanding of how meaningless and chaotic existence really is. This anti-intellectual streak isn't promoting ignorance as bliss. It's questioning whether intelligence and education, as they currently exist in our society, actually serve human flourishing or just create new forms of suffering and alienation. The show suggests that wisdom might be different from intelligence, and that genuine understanding might require accepting mystery and uncertainty rather than seeking complete knowledge and control. The musical episodes and cutaway gags serve a specific psychological function beyond simple entertainment. They provide brief escapes from the relentless dysfunction of the main narrative. These moments of pure creativity and joy remind us what human beings are capable of when they're not trapped in cycles of self-destruction and mutual harm. But even these moments are tinged with sadness because they highlight how rare genuine happiness and creativity are in the Griffin family's daily life. The contrast makes their normal dysfunction seem even more tragic and unnecessary. As we reach the end of our deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, what emerges is a picture of a universe that's simultaneously hopeless and hopeful, meaningless and profound. The show presents human nature as fundamentally flawed and destructive, yet it also shows us moments of genuine love, creativity, and connection that make existence worthwhile despite its inherent tragedy. The Griffin family represents all of us at our worst and occasionally at our best. Their dysfunction is our dysfunction, magnified and exaggerated for comedic effect, but rooted in recognizable human weaknesses and fears. Their rare moments of genuine connection remind us that love and meaning are possible, even in the midst of chaos and pain. The true lore of Family Guy isn't hidden in elaborate conspiracy theories or complex mythologies. It's hidden in plain sight, in the psychological patterns and relationship dynamics that drive every episode. It's a show about damaged people trying to connect with each other and failing most of the time, but occasionally succeeding in ways that make all the failure worthwhile. And maybe that's the most profound truth of all. That meaning doesn't come from avoiding dysfunction and chaos, but from finding ways to love and connect, despite the inevitable presence of dysfunction and chaos in all human relationships. The Griffins aren't aspirational characters. They're cautionary tales and sources of recognition, mirrors that reflect our own struggles with identity, purpose, and connection. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching crude humor and pop culture references. You're watching one of the most complex examinations of human nature ever created, disguised as mindless entertainment, but actually offering profound insights into what it means to be human in a universe that often seems indifferent to our suffering and our joy. Sweet dreams, and may your own family dysfunction be slightly less chaotic than the Griffins, but no less full of unexpected moments of love and meaning that make it all worthwhile. The lore of Family Guy is ultimately the lore of being human, and that's a story that never really ends. It just keeps evolving with each new episode of our own lives. Did you know that Family Guy has been secretly building one of the most complex fictional universes on television for over 2 decades? And tonight, we're diving deep into every hidden connection, conspiracy theory, and mind-bending detail that will either put you to sleep or keep you awake all night thinking about how Brian Griffin might actually be the smartest character in animated television history. Welcome to the most comprehensive exploration of Family Guy lore ever assembled, where we'll uncover the hidden patterns that connect seemingly random episodes across 20-plus seasons, reveal the dark psychological underpinnings of Peter Griffin's behavior, and examine why this seemingly simple animated sitcom contains more philosophical depth than most people realize. Let's start with something that seems innocent on the surface but becomes deeply unsettling when you really think about it. The fact that Stewie Griffin, a 1-year-old baby, possesses technology that surpasses anything available in our current reality. His time machine alone represents engineering capabilities that would revolutionize human civilization. Yet nobody in his family seems to notice or care that their infant has created devices that violate the fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. The implications of Stewie's inventions extend far beyond simple comedy. When you consider that he's built ray guns, mind control devices, teleportation equipment, and vehicles capable of interdimensional travel, all while maintaining the physical and cognitive limitations of a toddler. This suggests either that the Griffin family exists in a universe where the laws of science operate completely differently, or that Stewie himself represents something far more extraordinary than a precocious child. Think about the episodes where Stewie travels through time and encounters multiple versions of himself from different timelines. Each iteration of Stewie possesses the same impossible technological capabilities, which implies that his genius transcends individual timeline variations. This consistency across dimensional boundaries suggests that Stewie's intelligence might be a fundamental constant in the Family Guy multiverse, rather than a random genetic anomaly. But here's where things get really interesting when we examine the relationship between Stewie's technological capabilities and Brian's intellectual development throughout the series. Brian Griffin starts as a relatively normal talking dog who enjoys literature and maintains liberal political views. However, as the seasons progress, his personality becomes increasingly complex, cynical, and philosophically sophisticated, almost as if he's being influenced by prolonged exposure to Stewie's advanced technology and interdimensional adventures. The evolution of Brian's character raises questions about the nature of consciousness and intelligence in the Family Guy universe. If a dog can develop human-level cognitive abilities and engage in complex, philosophical discussions, then what does this say about the fundamental nature of reality in Quahog? The fact that Brian's intelligence continues expanding throughout the series while other characters remain relatively static suggests that something unique is happening to him. Specifically, consider the episodes where Brian dies and is replaced by Vinny, the replacement dog. who, despite being the same species, lacks Brian's intellectual capabilities. This proves that Brian's intelligence isn't simply a species-wide trait, but something specifically tied to his individual consciousness. The temporary replacement storyline also demonstrates how integral Brian has become to the family dynamic, not just as a pet, but as a legitimate family member whose absence creates genuine emotional trauma. The relationship between Brian and Stewie represents one of the most complex friendships in animated television, spanning adventures through time, space, and alternate dimensions. Their bond transcends typical pet-owner relationships and approaches something resembling true intellectual partnership. This dynamic becomes even more fascinating when you consider that their adventures often involve visiting timelines where their relationship takes different forms, sometimes as friends, sometimes as enemies, and occasionally as something approaching equals moving deeper into Family Guy lore. We encounter the recurring theme of Peter Griffin's seemingly limitless capacity for causing destruction, while somehow avoiding serious consequences. Peter has crashed vehicles through buildings, started international incidents, caused environmental disasters, and engaged in behavior that would realistically result in imprisonment or death. Yet he continues living his suburban lifestyle with minimal repercussions for his actions. This pattern suggests that Peter might exist within some kind of protective narrative bubble, where conventional rules of cause and effect don't apply in the same way they would for normal people. The consistency of his survival across increasingly dangerous situations implies either supernatural intervention or existence within a simulated reality where certain characters are programmed to be essentially indestructible. The Griffin family's relationship with death itself provides another layer of complexity to the series' lore. Multiple characters have died and been resurrected, Brian's temporary death being the most notable example, but there are numerous instances where characters should have died, but somehow survived catastrophic events. This casual relationship with mortality suggests that the Family Guy universe operates under different existential rules than our reality. Quahog itself emerges as a character in the series when you examine how the town responds to the Griffin family's constant chaos. Despite Peter's regular destruction of property and public safety, the community continues functioning normally as if nothing happened. This resilience suggests either that Quahog exists outside normal space-time, or that the town itself possesses some kind of regenerative properties that allow it to recover from damage. The recurring characters in Family Guy form an intricate web of relationships that span decades of episodes, each bringing their own psychological complexities to the narrative. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the series creates interesting questions about character continuity and the nature of friendship in long-running animated series. His experiences in his own spin-off show technically exist within the same universe, but rarely get referenced in Family Guy proper, creating a kind of parallel narrative space. Glenn Quagmire represents perhaps the most problematic character in terms of Family Guy lore, because his behavior often crosses lines that would be completely unacceptable in real life. Yet he's treated as a quirky neighbor rather than a legitimate threat. This treatment reveals something disturbing about the moral framework of the Family Guy universe, where certain types of harmful behavior are normalized through repetition and comedic presentation. The Chicken Man fights between Peter and Ernie. The giant chicken deserves special attention because they represent some of the most elaborately choreographed sequences in the entire series. These battles often span multiple locations, involve massive collateral damage, and demonstrate fighting capabilities that far exceed what either character should possess based on their apparent physical attributes. The chicken fights serve as almost mythological episodes within the series where normal rules are completely suspended. When examining these extended fight sequences, you notice they follow patterns similar to classic mythology, where heroes and monsters engage in battles that reshape the landscape around them. The destruction caused during these fights would realistically devastate Quahog's infrastructure and economy. Yet everything returns to normal by the next episode, as if these epic confrontations exist in a separate reality layer. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for create their own complex narrative space where characters interact with historical figures, fictional characters, and alternate versions of themselves. These brief sequences often contain more concentrated storytelling than entire episodes of other shows, and they've created a vast library of micro-narratives that exist alongside the main Family Guy timeline. Some cutaway gags reference each other across seasons, creating a meta-narrative about the nature of memory and storytelling within the Family Guy universe. The fact that characters sometimes remember events from cutaway gags in later episodes suggests that these sequences aren't just comedic diversions but actual experiences that exist within the characters' shared reality. The show's treatment of religion and spirituality adds another layer to its lore, with multiple episodes exploring different afterlife concepts. Divine intervention scenarios and questions about the nature of good and evil. Death appears as a recurring character who seems genuinely concerned about maintaining cosmic balance, which implies that the Family Guy universe operates under specific metaphysical rules. Episodes featuring Death reveal that the afterlife in Family Guy functions more like a bureaucracy than a spiritual realm with specific procedures for soul collection and processing. This bureaucratic approach to mortality suggests that existence in the Family Guy universe might be more regulated and systematic than it initially appears, despite the surface-level chaos. The time travel episodes create fascinating paradoxes and timeline complications that the show sometimes acknowledges and sometimes completely ignores. This inconsistent approach to temporal mechanics suggests that time itself might function differently in the Family Guy universe, perhaps operating more like a narrative device than a fixed physical law. Stewie's time travel adventures often involve meeting historical figures who react to him as if talking babies are perfectly normal. This consistency across different time periods implies that the unusual characteristics of Family Guy characters might be universal constants that exist across all timelines rather than modern anomalies. The show's relationship with celebrity culture creates interesting questions about the nature of reality within its universe. Real celebrities often appear as themselves, but they interact with the fictional Griffin family as if they're legitimate public figures. This blending of real and fictional personalities suggests that the Family Guy universe might exist parallel to our own reality rather than completely separate from it. When celebrities appear in Family Guy, they often display exaggerated versions of their public personas, which raises questions about whether these are the actual celebrities or fictional representations based on public perception. The show's treatment of celebrity interactions reveals something interesting about how fictional universes can comment on and interact with real-world culture. The evolution of animation quality throughout Family Guy's run creates its own meta-narrative about the nature of visual reality within the show. Early episodes feature simpler animation styles, while later seasons display increasingly sophisticated visual effects. This progression mirrors technological advancement in our reality, but within the show it might represent something deeper about the nature of visual perception in the Family Guy universe. Episodes that specifically reference the show's animation style or production history create fascinating recursive loops where characters become aware of their fictional nature without fully breaking the fourth wall. These moments suggest that the characters might exist on multiple levels of reality simultaneously, both as fictional constructs and as conscious beings within their own universe. The Griffin family's economic situation provides another layer of complexity because Peter's job history and income level should realistically make their lifestyle impossible. Yet they maintain a suburban home, support multiple vehicles, and finance Stewie's expensive scientific experiments. This economic impossibility suggests that traditional rules of finance and resource management don't apply in the Family Guy universe. Episodes that focus on the family's financial struggles reveal that they do face economic consequences, but these problems get resolved through increasingly absurd means that wouldn't work in real life. This pattern implies that the Griffin family exists within a narrative framework where problems require narrative solutions rather than realistic ones. The show's treatment of education and intelligence creates interesting patterns when you examine how different characters learn and grow. Brian's intellectual development contrasts sharply with Peter's consistent ignorance, despite both characters having access to similar information and experiences. This disparity suggests that intelligence in the Family Guy universe might be more fixed and character-specific than it is in reality. Stewie's advanced knowledge, despite his infant status, raises questions about how learning and development work in this fictional universe. His vocabulary and technical expertise far exceed what any child could realistically possess. Yet other baby characters in the show display normal infant behavior. This inconsistency implies that Stewie's intelligence might be supernatural rather than developmental. The recurring theme of alternate dimensions and parallel universes in Family Guy creates a complex multiverse structure where different versions of familiar characters exist with varying personality traits and life circumstances. These alternate reality episodes suggest that the main Family Guy timeline is just one possible configuration among infinite variations. When characters travel between dimensions, they often encounter versions of themselves that made different life choices or develop different personality traits. This concept implies that character identity in the Family Guy universe might be more fluid and circumstantial than it initially appears. The multiverse episodes also raise questions about free will and determinism within the show's cosmology. The show's approach to historical events creates fascinating anachronisms and alternative history scenarios that suggest the Family Guy universe might exist in a timeline that diverges from our own reality in subtle but important ways. Episodes set in historical periods often include modern elements that shouldn't exist, which implies either time travel influence or an alternate historical development. Family Guy's treatment of technology advancement shows interesting patterns where some innovations appear decades ahead of schedule, while others lag behind realistic development timelines. This inconsistent technological progression suggests that innovation in the Family Guy universe might be driven by different factors than in our reality. The psychological depth of individual characters becomes more apparent when you examine their behavior patterns across multiple seasons. Peter's childlike wonder and destructive impulses suggest possible developmental disorders or psychological trauma that the show explores through comedy rather than serious analysis. This approach reveals character complexity while maintaining entertainment value. Brian's intellectual pretensions and emotional vulnerabilities create a character study about the relationship between intelligence and happiness. His struggles with depression, alcoholism, and unfulfilled artistic ambitions represent serious psychological themes disguised as animated comedy. This layered characterization demonstrates how Family Guy uses humor to explore deeper human experiences. Lois Griffin's role as the family anchor reveals interesting dynamics about gender roles and family stability in dysfunctional households. Her ability to maintain sanity while managing Peter's chaos, Stewie's schemes, and the general dysfunction suggests either extraordinary psychological resilience or possible supernatural intervention. The supporting characters in Family Guy each contribute to a larger tapestry of human behavior and social commentary. Joe Swanson's disability and heroic personality create discussions about capability and determination, while Mayor West's bizarre behavior comments on political leadership and civic responsibility. As we reach the end of this exploration into Family Guy lore, it becomes clear that what appears to be a simple animated sitcom actually contains layers of philosophical complexity, psychological depth, and narrative sophistication that reward careful analysis. The show's ability to maintain comedic entertainment while exploring serious themes demonstrates the power of animation as a storytelling medium. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying awake, thinking about these connections, Family Guy continues evolving and adding new layers to its already complex mythology. Each episode contributes to a larger narrative about family dysfunction, American culture, and the absurd nature of modern existence, wrapped in accessible animated comedy that somehow makes profound observations about the human condition feel effortlessly entertaining and surprisingly profound. Have you ever wondered why Meg Griffin is treated so terribly by her own family? What you're about to discover will completely change how you see Family Guy forever. I'm talking about hidden lore, deleted scenes, and creator secrets that explain everything about the most hated character on television. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Meg the same way again. But before we dive into these shocking revelations, let me ask you something. How many times have you watched Peter literally abuse his daughter and just laughed it off? How many times have you seen Lois completely ignore Meg's cries for help? What if I told you there's a disturbing reason behind all of this, and it's way darker than you think? Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Meg Griffin wasn't always supposed to be the punching bag of the Griffin family. In the original concept art and early story treatments, Meg was designed to be the voice of reason, the straight man character who would call out the family's absurd behavior. She was meant to be relatable, intelligent, and the character viewers would connect with most. But something changed during production that transformed her into the most abused character in animated television history. The transformation of Meg Griffin began with a simple creative decision that snowballed into something much more sinister. Seth MacFarlane and the writing team discovered that having Meg be the target of jokes created an easy comedic formula. Need a quick laugh? Have someone insult Meg. Running short on time? Make Meg the butt of a cruel joke. What started as occasional comic relief became systematic psychological torture disguised as family entertainment. Here's where it gets really disturbing. The writers didn't just randomly choose Meg to be the family scapegoat. They specifically crafted her character to represent every teenage girl who feels invisible, unloved, and rejected by their family. Think about it. Meg's experiences mirror the real struggles of millions of teenagers who feel like outsiders in their own homes. The show takes these genuine feelings of adolescent pain and turns them into punchlines for adult entertainment. But wait, there's more. Did you know that Lacey Chabert, the original voice of Meg, left the show after just one season? The official reason given was scheduling conflicts, but industry insiders tell a different story. Chabert reportedly became uncomfortable with the increasingly cruel direction of Meg's character. She allegedly expressed concerns about the psychological implications of voicing a character who suffered such relentless abuse, even in a cartoon format. When Mila Kunis took over the role, she brought a different energy to Meg, but the character's treatment only got worse. The writers seemed to interpret Kunis's stronger vocal presence as permission to heap even more abuse on Meg. It's as if they felt they needed to work harder to break down this version of the character, leading to increasingly disturbing storylines and more brutal family dynamics. Let's talk about the episode that was so controversial it was partially rewritten before airing. In the original version of Barely Legal, Meg's obsession with Brian was portrayed much more sympathetically. The initial script showed Meg as a lonely teenager desperately seeking any form of affection, with Brian genuinely caring about her well-being. But the network demanded changes, wanting more comedic moments at Meg's expense. The final version transformed Meg's legitimate emotional needs into creepy stalker behavior, making her the villain of her own story. Here's something that will make your skin crawl. The show's writers have admitted in interviews that they use Meg as a testing ground for how far they can push controversial content. If a joke about domestic abuse, mental illness, or teenage depression doesn't work with other characters, they try it with Meg first. She's literally a guinea pig for the most disturbing content the show produces. The reasoning? If viewers are already conditioned to see Meg as deserving of mistreatment, they're less likely to object to increasingly dark humor. The psychological profile of Meg Griffin reveals something truly heartbreaking. She exhibits classic symptoms of severe depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Her desperate attempts to fit in, her willingness to endure abuse for even momentary acceptance, and her complete lack of self-worth all point to a character who has been systematically broken down by years of family trauma. The show presents this as comedy, but it's actually a textbook case study of emotional and psychological abuse. But here's where the lore gets really twisted. There's an unaired episode from Season 3 that was deemed too dark for broadcast. In this episode, titled Meg's Breaking Point, the character finally snaps and confronts her family about their treatment of her. The episode was fully animated and voiced before being pulled from the schedule. According to leaked production notes, the episode ended with Meg attempting to leave the family permanently, only to be guilt-tripped into staying by a manipulative speech from Peter about how the family needs her to abuse. The censored content doesn't stop there. Multiple episodes have had scenes removed that showed the long-term psychological effects of the family's treatment of Meg. These deleted scenes included Meg self-harming, having panic attacks, and showing signs of dissociation during family interactions. The network apparently felt these realistic consequences of abuse were too heavy for a comedy show, but they were perfectly fine with the abuse itself continuing episode after episode. Let's examine the most disturbing aspect of Meg's character development. Over the years, she's been conditioned to believe she deserves the mistreatment she receives. This is called learned helplessness, a psychological phenomenon where abuse victims begin to accept their situation as normal and stop trying to escape or improve their circumstances. The show has documented this process in real time, showing viewers exactly how psychological abuse breaks down a person's will to resist. Family Guy's treatment of Meg becomes even more disturbing when you consider the show's massive influence on popular culture. Millions of viewers, including impressionable teenagers, watch this show and learn that it's acceptable and even funny to systematically torment family members who are perceived as different or unpopular. The show has normalized family dysfunction to a degree that's genuinely concerning for child psychologists and family therapists. The voice acting reveals another layer of this disturbing lore. Mila Kunis has admitted in interviews that voicing Meg's more heartbreaking moments genuinely affects her emotionally. She's described having to take breaks during recording sessions when Meg's dialogue becomes too realistic in its portrayal of despair and hopelessness. The fact that professional voice actors struggle with this content should tell us something about how genuinely dark it really is. There's also the hidden symbolism in Meg's character design that most viewers never notice. Her pink beanie isn't just a fashion choice. It's meant to represent her attempt to hide and protect herself from the world. Her oversized clothes are armor against judgment and criticism. Even her glasses represent her desire to see the world clearly, while feeling that the world refuses to see her at all. Every aspect of her appearance tells the story of someone trying to disappear. The show's international versions reveal even more disturbing lore about Meg. In several countries, episodes featuring extreme Meg abuse have been edited or banned entirely. Some international broadcasters have added content warnings specifically for Meg-centric episodes, treating them as potentially harmful content rather than simple comedy. This raises serious questions about why American audiences are considered more accepting of this type of content. Here's something that will shock you about the show's merchandise and marketing. Despite being a main character, Meg is systematically excluded from most Family Guy promotional materials. Official merchandise featuring the Griffin family often leaves Meg out entirely, or places her in the background. This marketing strategy mirrors the character's treatment in the show itself, making her invisible even in promotional contexts. The fan community's relationship with Meg reveals the character's true cultural impact. While most characters have dedicated fan bases, Meg's fans are primarily people who identify with feeling like family outcasts themselves. The character has become an unintentional symbol for anyone who's ever felt unloved, unwanted, or systematically mistreated by those who should care for them most. This wasn't the creator's intention, but it's become Meg's most significant cultural legacy. Recent seasons have included subtle hints that the writers are beginning to recognize the problematic nature of Meg's treatment. There have been episodes where her family's behavior toward her is called out by other characters, and moments where Meg shows unexpected strength and self-respect. However, these moments are always followed by a return to the status quo, suggesting that the show is trapped by its own established dynamics. The most disturbing piece of Family Guy lore involving Meg comes from a writer's room story that was leaked several years ago. During the creation of an episode focused on Meg's birthday, the writing staff apparently spent an entire day brainstorming ways to make her special day as miserable as possible. The goal wasn't comedy. It was seeing how creatively they could torture the characters psychologically while maintaining the show's tone. This reveals a level of systematic cruelty in the creative process that goes far beyond simple comedic writing. But perhaps the most shocking revelation about Meg Griffin is what she represents in terms of the show's larger themes. Family Guy isn't actually a show about a dysfunctional family learning to love each other despite their flaws. It's a show about how families can systematically destroy their most vulnerable members while convincing themselves and others that it's all harmless fun. Meg is the canary in the coal mine, the character whose treatment reveals the true darkness lurking beneath the show's comedic surface. The psychological research that's been conducted on Family Guy's impact specifically cites Meg's treatment as potentially harmful to viewers who identify with her character. Studies have shown that prolonged exposure to this type of normalized family abuse can actually affect how viewers perceive their own family dynamics. Young people who see themselves in Meg might begin to accept similar treatment in their own lives as normal or deserved. What makes this even more concerning is the show's longevity and cultural penetration. Meg Griffin has been suffering this abuse for over 2 decades, across hundreds of episodes, reaching billions of viewers worldwide. The character has become one of television's most recognizable symbols of systematic family scapegoating, and that influence extends far beyond entertainment into real social attitudes about family dynamics and acceptable behavior. The voice direction for Meg's character provides another window into how deliberately her suffering is crafted. Voice directors reportedly give specific instructions to emphasize Meg's pain, disappointment, and desperation in ways that make these emotions more pronounced and uncomfortable. The goal isn't just to make her a comedic target, but to make her suffering feel authentic enough to create a specific type of uncomfortable humor that some viewers apparently find entertaining. Industry insiders have revealed that several guest stars have refused to participate in episodes that focused heavily on Meg's mistreatment. Some notable actors and comedians have reportedly declined guest appearances specifically because they were uncomfortable contributing to storylines that portrayed systematic family abuse as comedic entertainment. This behind-the-scenes resistance suggests that even entertainment professionals recognize something disturbing about Meg's treatment. The international psychological community has actually used Family Guy, and specifically Meg's character arc, as a case study in how popular media can normalize abuse dynamics. The show is frequently cited in academic papers about media influence on social attitudes toward family violence and psychological abuse. Meg Griffin has become an unintentional but powerful example of how entertainment can shape cultural attitudes toward vulnerable populations. Here's the most disturbing realization of all. The systematic abuse of Meg Griffin isn't just a byproduct of lazy comedy writing or poor character development. It's a carefully maintained dynamic that serves a specific function in the show's structure. Meg exists to absorb all the darkness that would otherwise make the other characters completely unlikable. She's a lightning rod for cruelty, allowing Peter, Lois, and the others to commit terrible acts, while still being positioned as the protagonists viewers should root for. The merchandising data reveals something equally troubling about how the character is perceived by the show's marketing department. Internal documents from licensing deals show that Meg-focused products consistently underperform compared to other characters, leading to a systematic exclusion from product lines. This creates a feedback loop where the character's treatment in the show influences her commercial viability, which then influences how she's treated in future episodes. Family Guy's treatment of Meg Griffin represents something much darker than simple comedy, or even typical dysfunctional family dynamics. It's a systematic portrayal of how families can destroy their most vulnerable members while maintaining a facade of normalcy and even affection. The show has documented this process across hundreds of episodes, creating what may be television's most comprehensive depiction of long-term psychological abuse, disguised as entertainment. The character of Meg Griffin started as a typical teenage daughter character, but evolved into something much more disturbing. She's become a symbol of how systematic mistreatment can break down a person's sense of self-worth and hope. The show's writers have created a character whose primary function is to suffer, and they've done it with such consistency and creativity that it reveals something genuinely troubling about how our culture views acceptable targets for cruelty and abuse. So the next time you watch Family Guy and see Meg being mistreated by her family, remember that you're not just watching a simple cartoon comedy. You're witnessing the most comprehensive portrayal of systematic family abuse ever broadcast as entertainment. And the disturbing lore behind this character reveals truths about our culture that are far more unsettling than anything you'll see in a typical horror movie. The real question isn't why Meg is treated so badly, but why millions of viewers have been conditioned to find that treatment entertaining rather than horrifying.
Picture this. You're lying in bed, ready to drift off, and someone mentions Family Guy facts. Suddenly, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree, and sleep becomes impossible. Well, tonight, we're embracing the chaos with the most bizarre, hilarious, and downright shocking facts about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family. So get comfortable, because these Family Guy secrets are about to blow your mind. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the show. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first time was in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But here's where it gets wild. The show's resurrection had nothing to do with critical acclaim or network executives suddenly realizing their mistake. It was all about DVD sales and late-night reruns on Adult Swim. The fans literally brought this show back from the dead through pure dedication and binge-watching. But that's just the beginning of the madness. Did you know that Seth MacFarlane almost died on September 11, 2001? He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane to hit the World Trade Center. The only reason he missed that flight was because he had been out drinking the night before, and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. He showed up to the airport hungover and 15 minutes too late. Talk about a sliding doors moment that changed television history forever. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, this guy is basically a one-man entertainment machine. He doesn't just voice multiple characters on the show. He voices Peter Griffin, Brian the dog, Stewie, Glenn Quagmire, and Carter Pewterschmidt, plus several other recurring characters. That means when Peter and Brian are having a conversation, it's literally just Seth talking to himself in different voices. The recording sessions must be absolutely bonkers. Now, here's a fact that'll mess with your head. The show's signature cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, weren't originally part of the plan. They started as a way to fill time when episodes were running short. But they became so popular that they're now considered the show's trademark. Some episodes have been built entirely around these seemingly random interruptions. Let's talk about the characters for a moment, because there are some seriously twisted details hiding beneath the surface. Take Stewie Griffin, the diabolical baby genius. His character was originally inspired by the child character from the British sitcom The Onedin Line, but with a much darker twist. The writers have confirmed that Stewie has an incredibly high body count throughout the series, and we're not talking about toy soldiers here. In various episodes, Stewie has eliminated family members, strangers, celebrities, and even historical figures. There was that time he burned down a playhouse with children inside because he caught his girlfriend cheating. Then there's the episode where he takes out a prostitute with a sniper rifle for absolutely no reason other than target practice. And let's not forget when he dressed up as Santa and traumatized an entire family on Christmas morning, leaving behind what can only be described as a holiday horror scene. But Stewie's kill count gets exponentially more insane when you factor in his partnership with Penelope, his equally psychotic girlfriend. Together, they embarked on a global destruction spree that included bombing the Great Wall of China, destroying the Eiffel Tower, and creating a tidal wave that wiped out Copenhagen. When you add up all the casualties from their international terrorism campaign, we're talking about millions of victims. This baby character has technically committed genocide multiple times. The really disturbing part is how casually the show treats these mass casualty events. They're played for laughs, but when you actually sit down and think about the implications, Stewie, Griffin might be one of the most prolific fictional killers in television history. And he's supposed to be a 1-year-old baby. Moving away from the murder and mayhem, let's dive into some behind-the-scenes secrets that are equally fascinating. The show's animation style has evolved dramatically over the years, but not always in ways you'd expect. The early seasons were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, but the show switched to digital animation in later seasons. However, they deliberately kept certain imperfections in the animation to maintain that slightly rough, hand-drawn aesthetic that fans loved. Here's something that'll surprise you about the voice acting. Several major celebrity guest stars have appeared on the show, but many of them recorded their lines over the phone or via video call. This means some of your favorite celebrity cameos were literally phoned in, quite literally. The production team became masters at making these remote recordings sound like they were recorded in the same studio as the main cast. The show's musical numbers are another hidden gem of complexity. Seth MacFarlane, being a professional singer himself, often performs the songs live with a full orchestra. Those elaborate musical sequences you see in episodes aren't just animated afterthoughts. They're often recorded with full big band arrangements, complete with brass sections and professional backup singers. The amount of production value that goes into a 3-minute cartoon musical number rivals what you'd see in actual Broadway shows. But here's where things get really weird with the show's continuity. Family Guy exists in a universe where almost anything can happen, and the writers take full advantage of this freedom. Characters die and come back to life regularly. The family has traveled through time, met their alternate universe selves, and even broken the fourth wall to acknowledge that they're cartoon characters. This narrative flexibility allows for some truly bizarre storylines that would be impossible in live-action television. One of the most mind-bending aspects of the show is how it handles character development, or rather, how it deliberately avoids it. Unlike most long-running series where characters grow and change over time, Family Guy operates on what's essentially a reset button philosophy. No matter what happens in an episode, everyone goes back to their baseline personalities by the next episode. This means Peter can learn valuable life lessons, die, get married again, become president, or transform into a completely different person, and none of it matters the following week. This approach extends to the show's relationship with its own mythology. Remember when Brian died and was replaced by a new dog named Vinny? The fan outrage was so intense that the writers brought Brian back to life just a few episodes later. But rather than pretend the death never happened, they incorporated the resurrection into the show's time travel mythology. It's this kind of meta-storytelling that keeps fans constantly guessing about what's real and what's just another throwaway gag. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends far beyond just being a popular cartoon. The show has influenced internet meme culture in ways that most people don't even realize. That "oh no" chicken fight scene between Peter and the giant chicken has become a template for depicting extended, over-the-top cartoon violence. The "it insists upon itself" quote about The Godfather has become shorthand for pretentious film criticism. And don't even get me started on how many internet arguments have been settled by simply posting a Family Guy cutaway gag. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the show is how it serves as a time capsule for American pop culture over the past 2 decades. Episodes from the early 2000s are filled with references to celebrities, movies, and cultural phenomena that were huge at the time but have since been forgotten. Watching old episodes is like taking a trip through a museum of pop culture history, complete with all the embarrassing fashion choices and forgotten scandals. The show's approach to controversial topics has always been deliberately provocative. The writers seem to take a perverse pleasure in pushing boundaries and seeing how far they can go before someone complains. But here's the thing that's often overlooked. Beneath all the shock value and offensive humor, the show actually has a surprisingly progressive worldview on many social issues. It just packages that progressivism in such outrageous wrapping that people miss the actual message. Take the character of Brian, the family dog. On the surface, he's just a talking dog who drinks martinis and has pretensions of being an intellectual. But Brian often serves as the show's moral compass, calling out the other characters when they do terrible things. His relationship with the family, particularly with Stewie, represents some of the show's most genuine emotional moments. When Brian temporarily died, the fan reaction wasn't just about losing a funny character. People were genuinely heartbroken because Brian represented the heart of the show. The animation team behind Family Guy has developed some truly innovative techniques over the years. Those elaborate fight scenes, particularly the ones involving Peter and the giant chicken, require months of planning and animation work. The sequences are choreographed like actual action movies, with careful attention paid to pacing, camera angles, and dramatic timing. The fact that all this effort goes into animating a man fighting a poultry mascot is both absurd and oddly impressive. Here's a production secret that most fans don't know. The show's writers often create multiple versions of controversial jokes, starting with the most extreme version and then gradually toning it down until they find something that Fox will actually allow on television. This means, for every outrageous joke that makes it into an episode, there are probably 3 or 4 even more outrageous versions sitting in a file somewhere. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive. There are Family Guy branded everything from coffee mugs to car accessories to clothing lines. But the most surprising merchandising success has been Stewie Griffin baby products. Yes, parents are apparently comfortable decorating their nurseries with imagery of a homicidal infant genius. The irony is probably lost on most consumers, but it's definitely not lost on the show's creators. One aspect of the show that deserves more recognition is its musical sophistication. Seth MacFarlane's background as a professional musician shows up constantly in the series. The show regularly features complex musical arrangements, sophisticated harmonies, and genre pastiche that demonstrates a deep understanding of American musical traditions. When Family Guy does a musical number, it's not just a cartoon singing a silly song, it's often a legitimate piece of musical entertainment that could stand on its own. The show's relationship with censorship has always been complicated. While Fox allows Family Guy to get away with content that would never fly on network television during prime time, the show still operates under certain restrictions. The writers have become masters at implying things they can't show directly. Sometimes the most shocking moments happen entirely off-screen, letting your imagination fill in the disturbing details. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's comedy philosophy. The show doesn't just break the fourth wall occasionally, it demolishes the fourth wall completely and then rebuilds it just so it can break it again. Characters regularly acknowledge that they're in a television show, comment on their own animation style, and even complain about changes in their voice actors. This level of meta humor was revolutionary when the show started, and it's still pushing boundaries today. The international versions of Family Guy are fascinating studies in cultural adaptation. Different countries have had to handle the show's content in wildly different ways. Some countries censor entire episodes, while others rewrite dialogue completely to make cultural references more relevant to local audiences. There are probably versions of Family Guy exist where the characters are having completely different conversations while their mouths move to the original English dialogue. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy's bizarre universe, it's worth reflecting on why these facts are so compelling. There's something oddly comforting about learning the secrets behind a show that's designed to be completely unpredictable. Even when Family Guy is at its most chaotic and nonsensical, there are real people behind the scenes making deliberate, creative choices, putting enormous effort into crafting these moments of animated insanity. The show has managed to maintain its relevance for over 2 decades by constantly evolving while never losing its core identity. It's simultaneously one of the most juvenile shows on television and one of the most sophisticated pieces of pop culture commentary ever created. That contradiction is probably the most Family Guy thing of all. So the next time you're channel surfing and stumble across a Family Guy rerun, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're experiencing a complex piece of entertainment that represents millions of hours of creative work, countless cultural references, and enough behind-the-scenes drama to fill several seasons of reality television. Sweet dreams, and may your Family Guy nightmares be filled with giant chicken fights and Stewie's diabolical laughter echoing through your subconscious. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless YouTube videos at 2 a.m., your brain craving something familiar yet fascinating to drift off to. Well, buckle up because I've got a treasure trove of Family Guy secrets that'll either help you sleep peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this animated chaos machine actually works. From behind-the-scenes drama to mind-bending production facts, these random tidbits about the Griffin family will give your brain exactly what it needs for that perfect sleepy time content. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. The voice of Stewie Griffin, that diabolical baby genius we all know and love, is performed by the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane himself. But here's the kicker that most people don't realize. MacFarlane originally based Stewie's voice on the legendary actor Rex Harrison, who played Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. That posh, sophisticated British accent that makes Stewie sound like he stepped out of a Victorian manor. It's basically a baby doing an impression of a 1,960 seconds Broadway star. The irony is delicious when you think about it. This character who spends half his time plotting world domination is essentially channeling a musical theater legend. Now, if you think that's wild, wait until you hear about the show's near-death experience that almost prevented it from becoming the cultural phenomenon we know today. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and for a hot minute there, it looked like the Griffin family was done for good. But then something magical happened that literally brought the show back from the dead. DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns created such a massive fan following that Fox had no choice but to resurrect it in 2005. It's like the show became a zombie that refused to stay buried, clawing its way back to life through sheer fan devotion. The creation story of Family Guy itself reads like something out of a fever dream. Seth MacFarlane was just 24 years old when he pitched the show to Fox, making him one of the youngest people ever to create and run their own animated series for a major network. He literally animated the entire pilot episode by himself, spending months hunched over a desk drawing frame after frame while surviving on probably nothing but coffee and determination. The original pitch was actually inspired by his college thesis film called The Life of Larry, which featured a middle-aged man with a talking dog. Sound familiar? That little student film eventually evolved into the multi-million-dollar empire we know today. Speaking of that talking dog, Brian Griffin holds a special place in animation history for reasons you probably never considered. Unlike most cartoon pets who remain perpetually animal-like, Brian is essentially a human character who just happens to be a dog. He drives cars, drinks martinis, writes novels, and engages in complex philosophical debates. MacFarlane has stated that Brian represents his own voice in the show more than any other character, which explains why the dog often serves as the moral compass of the family. It's basically MacFarlane having conversations with himself through a talking animal, which, when you think about it, is either brilliant or slightly concerning. The show's controversial humor didn't emerge by accident. It was a carefully calculated rebellion against traditional family sitcoms. MacFarlane deliberately set out to create the anti-Simpsons, something that would push every boundary the Simpsons wouldn't touch. Where the Simpsons used gentle satire and heartwarming family moments, Family Guy went nuclear with shock, humor, and deliberately offensive content. The cutaway gags, those random flashback sequences that became the show's signature, were originally MacFarlane's solution to a problem he had with traditional sitcom pacing. He wanted to break free from the constraints of linear storytelling and create something that felt more like channel surfing through a fever dream. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the craft behind the chaos. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial script to final animation. That means the episodes you're watching right now were being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process alone involves hundreds of artists working across multiple studios, with the initial designs created in California before being sent overseas for full animation. It's like a massive international relay race, where each handoff has to be perfect or the whole episode falls apart. The voice acting sessions are apparently legendary affairs that sound more like comedy improv shows than traditional recording sessions. MacFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Brian, Peter, and Glenn Quagmire, often having entire conversations with himself in the recording booth. The other voice actors have described watching him switch between characters mid-sentence as both impressive and slightly unsettling. Imagine seeing someone argue with themselves in 4 different voices while maintaining perfect character consistency. It's basically like watching a one-man theater performance in real time. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production is how the writer's room operates. Unlike many animated shows that plan seasons far in advance, Family Guy's writing process is notoriously chaotic and last-minute. Writers have described sessions where entire episodes get scrapped days before animation begins, leading to frantic rewrites and sleepless nights. This seat-of-the-pants approach actually contributes to the show's unpredictable energy, but it also means that voice actors sometimes receive new scripts literally hours before recording sessions. The show's relationship with censorship has been a constant dance between pushing boundaries and avoiding network wrath. Family Guy has developed an almost scientific approach to testing limits, deliberately writing jokes that are slightly more offensive than what they actually want to air, knowing that network censors will demand cuts. The final version that reaches viewers is often the writer's actual intended content, achieved through strategic overwriting and negotiation. It's psychological warfare, disguised as comedy writing. McFarlane's musical background plays a much larger role in the show than most people realize. Before creating Family Guy, he was actually a jazz vocalist and pianist, which explains the numerous musical numbers scattered throughout episodes. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just random comedy bits. They're genuine musical theater productions compressed into cartoon format. McFarlane has stated that he views Family Guy as partly a variety show, using the Griffin family as a framework to showcase different types of entertainment within each episode. The character designs themselves tell an interesting story about animation philosophy. Notice how the Griffin family members all have distinctly different body shapes and facial structures, unlike many cartoon families where everyone looks like variations of the same template. Peter's round, doughy appearance was specifically designed to contrast with Lois's sharp, angular features, while Stewie's football-shaped head was meant to make him instantly recognizable even in silhouette. These design choices weren't arbitrary. They were carefully calculated to ensure each character would be visually distinct even in crowded scenes or quick cuts. Here's something that'll change how you watch the show forever. The infamous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned as recurring segments. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but the animation team had so much fun creating the over-the-top action sequence that it became a running theme. Those elaborate, destruction-filled battles that seem to last forever? They're essentially the animation team showing off their action sequence skills in a comedy show, like flexing creative muscles that don't usually get exercised in traditional sitcom animation. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely twisted compared to other animated series. While most cartoons treat celebrity appearances as special events, with the famous person playing themselves or a character clearly meant to be them, Family Guy often buries celebrity voices in minor roles without any fanfare. A-list actors will voice background characters for single lines, and viewers might never realize they just heard a famous person deliver a throwaway joke. It's the entertainment industry equivalent of hiding expensive ingredients in cheap fast food. Family Guy's international versions reveal fascinating cultural differences in humor. In some countries, entire episodes have been rewritten because the original jokes simply don't translate, not just linguistically, but culturally. What Americans find hilarious might be completely incomprehensible to audiences in other parts of the world, leading to localized versions that are essentially different shows with the same characters. It's like each country gets its own flavor of the Griffin family chaos, tailored to local sensibilities. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy extends into some surprisingly niche markets. Beyond the obvious t-shirts and DVDs, there are Family Guy-themed wine collections, luxury watches, and even high-end collectible sculptures that cost thousands of dollars. The show that built its reputation on lowbrow humor has somehow spawned upscale merchandise that wouldn't look out of place in expensive boutiques. It's cultural cognitive dissonance at its finest. The writing staff includes people from incredibly diverse backgrounds: former stand-up comedians, Harvard graduates, television veterans, and complete newcomers to the industry. This mix creates a unique creative environment where highbrow intellectual humor crashes into street-level comedy instincts. The result is a show that can reference obscure philosophical concepts in one scene and make fart jokes in the next, often within the same episode. Animation errors in Family Guy have become something of a cult fascination among fans. Unlike other shows that try to hide mistakes, Family Guy occasionally leaves obvious animation goofs in the final product, either intentionally, as Easter eggs, or because the production schedule doesn't allow for fixes. These errors have spawned online communities dedicated to spotting and cataloging every miscolored character, floating object, or impossible perspective. It's accidental, interactive entertainment, where viewers become detectives hunting for visual inconsistencies. The show's theme song, that bouncy piano melody everyone knows by heart, was originally much longer and included additional verses that were cut for time. The full version tells a more complete story about the Griffin family's dynamics, but network television's rigid timing requirements forced it down to the bare essentials. McFarlane has occasionally performed the complete version at live concerts, giving fans a glimpse of what could have been the opening sequence if television had more flexible formatting. Voice acting for animated shows requires a completely different skill set than live-action performance, and Family Guy pushes these demands to extremes. The actors often need to deliver lines while laughing, crying, or even while their characters are supposed to be eating, fighting, or running. This means recording sessions frequently involve voice actors doing physical comedy performances in sound booths, acting out entire scenes with just their voices, while making exaggerated facial expressions that no one will ever see, but that somehow make the vocal performance more authentic. The show's relationship with current events creates unique production challenges. Because episodes take months to complete, jokes about contemporary issues often feel dated by the time they air, leading to a complex balancing act between topical relevance and timeless humor. Writers have developed strategies for creating content that feels current without being tied to specific news cycles, though sometimes they get caught off guard when major events happen during production and their carefully planned episodes suddenly seem tone-deaf or prescient in ways they never intended. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond just memes and viral videos. The show's cutaway gag structure essentially predicted how people would consume media in the social media age. Short, disconnected bursts of content that don't require following a linear narrative. Those seemingly random flashbacks that interrupt the main story. They're basically the television equivalent of scrolling through TikTok or Twitter, jumping from one unrelated thought to another without warning. The economics behind Family Guy reveal interesting insights into how modern television actually works. Despite being an animated show with relatively high production costs, it's incredibly profitable because animated content doesn't age the same way live-action shows do. There are no aging actors demanding higher salaries, no physical sets that deteriorate, and no location shoots that become impossible due to changing landscapes. The Griffin family can theoretically exist forever without any of the logistical problems that eventually kill most television series. Behind all the controversy and chaos, Family Guy operates like a massive creative experiment in pushing the boundaries of what television can be. Every episode is essentially asking the question, what if we tried this completely ridiculous thing and somehow made it work within the framework of a family sitcom? Sometimes the experiments fail spectacularly, but when they succeed, they create moments of television that are genuinely unlike anything else on the air. The show has created its own internal mythology that's become increasingly complex over the years. Character relationships, running gags, and callback references have built up layers of continuity that reward longtime viewers while potentially confusing newcomers. It's like a secret club where the membership requirement is having watched hundreds of hours of animated chaos, and the reward is understanding jokes that are incomprehensible to everyone else. And here's perhaps the most interesting fact about Family Guy. Despite all its success and cultural impact, the show remains fundamentally unpredictable. After more than 2 decades on the air, it can still surprise viewers with completely unexpected creative choices, bizarre guest appearances, or experimental episodes that break its own established rules. In a television landscape increasingly dominated by formulaic content, Family Guy maintains a chaotic creativity that keeps audiences guessing what might happen next. So there you have it, a deep dive into the wonderfully weird world behind one of television's most controversial animated families. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying wide awake in fascination, these facts reveal just how much complexity hides behind what appears to be simple cartoon chaos. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the Griffin household, normal is just another word for boring. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're scrolling through YouTube at 3 in the morning looking for something to help you drift off to dreamland, you've stumbled upon the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes completely unhinged world of Family Guy with some truly wild facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you wide awake wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's explore the wonderfully weird universe of Quahog, Rhode Island. Trust me, by the end of this journey through Family Guy's most fascinating secrets, you'll either be peacefully snoozing or have a whole new appreciation for just how crazy this show really gets. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox thought they were done with the Griffin family forever. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The ratings were so incredible that Fox literally had to eat humble pie and bring the show back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007, only to reverse that decision just months later. talk about a roller coaster relationship between a network and a show. Speaking of relationships, let's talk about the voice behind our favorite talking baby, Stewie Griffin. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice Stewie, he also voices Brian, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and several other characters. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane based Stewie's voice on the accent of English actor Rex Harrison, who you might know from the classic musical My Fair Lady. Yeah, that sophisticated, slightly pompous British accent that makes Stewie sound like an evil mastermind? It's straight from a Broadway legend. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he wanted Stewie to sound like an old-school English gentleman, which makes it even funnier when this supposedly refined character is plotting world domination from his crib. Now, if you think the show pushes boundaries on television, you should hear about some of the stuff that never made it to air. The writers and animators have created countless scenes, jokes, and entire storylines that were deemed too controversial even for Family Guy's standards. And considering what does make it onto television, that's really saying something. There's apparently an entire vault of unused content that could probably fill several seasons' worth of episodes. Some of these rejected bits have made their way onto DVD releases as deleted scenes, but many remain locked away forever, too wild even for the show known for having no limits. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Unlike many animated series that plan out entire seasons in advance, Family Guy often operates more like a live-action sitcom. The writers frequently come up with ideas on the spot, and episodes are sometimes completely rewritten just weeks before they're supposed to air. This spontaneous approach explains why the show can feel so fresh and unpredictable, but it also leads to some pretty intense crunch times for the animation team. Imagine trying to animate complex scenes with just days to spare before broadcast. Let's dive into some character secrets that most fans never realize. Brian the dog, everyone's favorite intellectual canine, was originally supposed to be just a regular pet. In the original concept, Brian was going to be a typical dog who couldn't talk and would just bark and fetch like any normal household pet. Seth MacFarlane decided to make him a talking character at the last minute, and thank goodness he did, because Brian's philosophical conversations and sarcastic wit have become some of the show's most memorable moments. It's wild to think that one of the most complex characters almost didn't have a voice at all. The show's animation style has some fascinating secrets too. Those seemingly simple character designs actually take an enormous amount of work to create. Each character has hundreds of different facial expressions and poses that animators can mix and match. Stewie alone has over 300 different mouth positions just for speaking different sounds. The animators have to keep track of all these variations to maintain consistency across episodes. It's like having a massive digital puppet show where every single movement has to be carefully orchestrated. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's music even more. Seth MacFarlane isn't just the creator, writer, and voice actor for multiple characters. He's also a legitimate recording artist who's released several albums of traditional pop standards. His musical background heavily influences the show, which is why you'll notice that Family Guy has more musical numbers than most animated comedies. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just thrown in for laughs. They're crafted by someone who genuinely understands musical theater and classic American songbook traditions. The show's cultural impact goes way beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has actually influenced real-world events and conversations. Politicians have referenced the show in speeches. Academics have written scholarly papers about its social commentary, and it's been credited with introducing younger audiences to cultural references they might never have encountered otherwise. Think about how many classic movies, TV shows, songs, and historical events you first learned about through a Family Guy cutaway gag. The show serves as this weird cultural bridge between different generations of entertainment. Now let's talk about some of the show's most controversial episodes and why they're so memorable. The writers have never shied away from tackling sensitive subjects, and sometimes their approach has sparked genuine debates about comedy, censorship, and social responsibility. Some episodes have been pulled from rotation, others have been edited for different markets, and a few have become legendary among fans, specifically because they pushed things too far. This willingness to court controversy has kept Family Guy relevant for over 2 decades, even as television landscape has changed dramatically around it. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unlike anything you'd expect. Seth MacFarlane often records multiple characters in the same session, essentially having conversations with himself. He'll record Peter's lines, then immediately switch to Brian's voice to respond, then jump to Stewie for the next exchange. Watching him work in the recording booth is apparently like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder having a very organized conversation with themselves. Other voice actors have said it's both impressive and slightly unsettling to watch. Here's something that connects to the show's longevity. Family Guy has aired over 400 episodes, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. To put that in perspective, if you watched every single episode back-to-back, you'd be sitting there for more than 150 hours straight. That's almost a full week of continuous Family Guy content. The show has literally created enough material to entertain someone for an entire week without sleeping, eating, or taking a single break. The show's international versions reveal some fascinating cultural differences. Family Guy is broadcast in dozens of countries, and each version has to navigate different censorship standards and cultural sensitivities. In some countries, entire jokes are replaced with completely different content. In others, characters' names are changed, and certain running gags are modified to make sense to local audiences. There are versions of Family Guy where the cultural references are so different that they're essentially completely different shows with the same characters. Let's explore some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans never hear about. Like any long-running show, Family Guy has had its share of creative disagreements, contract disputes, and personality conflicts. Seth MacFarlane has been very public about his occasional frustrations with the show, even stepping back from day-to-day involvement for several seasons. There have been disputes over storylines, character development, and the general direction of the show. Some former writers and voice actors have shared stories about heated arguments in writers' rooms and recording sessions that had to be stopped because of creative differences. The show's merchandising empire is absolutely massive, but some of the most interesting products never made it to market. There have been proposed Family Guy video games, theme park attractions, and even a planned Broadway musical that would have featured the Griffin family in live-action musical theater. The legal and logistical challenges of adapting animated characters for different mediums have killed dozens of potential projects over the years. Imagine walking through a Family Guy theme park, or watching actors in Peter and Lois costumes singing on Broadway. Here's a production secret that reveals how much work goes into each episode. A single 22-minute episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial concept to final broadcast. The process involves dozens of writers, voice actors, animators, sound engineers, and editors. Every single frame is reviewed multiple times. Every joke is analyzed and often rewritten. And every visual gag is carefully planned and executed. What looks like simple animation on screen represents thousands of hours of collaborative creative work. The show's relationship with censorship has created some legendary stories. There are episodes that exist in multiple versions, with different levels of content depending on when and where they're broadcast. The uncensored DVD versions of some episodes contain jokes and scenes that have never been seen on television. Meanwhile, daytime reruns are edited so heavily that some episodes are barely recognizable. The writers have learned to create content in layers, knowing that different versions will need different levels of editing for different audiences. Family Guy's influence on internet culture deserves its own discussion. The show has generated countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. Certain episodes have become legendary specifically because of how they're shared and referenced online. The show's cutaway gag format translates perfectly to social media, where short, punchy jokes can be easily shared and remixed. Some Family Guy moments have become more famous as internet memes than they ever were as television content. The voice acting talent that has appeared on Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment. Celebrities often jump at the chance to appear on the show, sometimes playing themselves, sometimes voicing original characters. The guest star list includes everyone from major Hollywood actors to political figures to professional athletes. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others have appeared just once but created memorable moments that fans still talk about years later. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the seemingly random cutaway gags are actually carefully constructed references to specific movies, TV shows, or historical events. The writers spend considerable time researching these references to make sure they're accurate, even when they're being completely absurd. There are entire databases that catalog every cultural reference in every episode, and the depth of knowledge required to understand all the jokes is honestly staggering. The show's animation has evolved significantly over its run, but not always in ways you might expect. While the overall character designs have remained consistent, the background art, lighting effects, and scene composition have become much more sophisticated. Early episodes look almost primitive compared to recent ones, but the evolution has been so gradual that most viewers don't notice. Comparing the pilot episode to current episodes is like looking at completely different shows that happen to use the same characters. Family Guy's impact on other animated shows cannot be overstated. The success of Family Guy paved the way for countless other adult animated comedies, from American Dad to Rick and Morty to BoJack Horseman. The show proved that animated comedies could tackle adult themes and attract mature audiences, opening up an entire genre that barely existed before. Many current animators and writers cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their work and career choices. The show's approach to storytelling often breaks conventional narrative rules in fascinating ways. Episodes frequently abandon their main plots entirely for extended tangents. Characters regularly break the fourth wall to address the audience directly, and the show often parodies its own format and conventions. This meta approach to comedy requires a level of self-awareness that's rare in television, and it's part of what keeps longtime fans engaged, even after hundreds of episodes. As we wind down this journey through Family Guy's hidden world, it's worth reflecting on how a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island became such a cultural phenomenon. The show succeeds because it taps into something fundamentally human about finding humor in chaos, about laughing at things that probably shouldn't be funny, and about the strange comfort of familiar characters, behaving in completely unpredictable ways. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or wide awake thinking about animated comedy theory, Family Guy continues to surprise, offend, entertain, and occasionally enlighten its audience after more than 20 years on the air. The show's ability to constantly reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity is perhaps the most impressive fact of all. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into trouble that's even weirder than anything we've discussed tonight. The chaos never really stops. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it so perfect for helping restless minds finally find peace. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the giant chicken nightmares bite. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy episodes feel like fever dreams that somehow make perfect sense at 3 in the morning? Tonight, we're diving into the most bizarre, unexpected, and downright weird facts about this animated chaos machine that's been keeping us entertained and slightly disturbed for over 2 decades. From secret celebrity cameos you never noticed to production secrets that will change how you watch every episode, these facts are perfect for those late-night rabbit holes when your brain needs something wonderfully random to chew on. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped animation studio, probably surviving on nothing but coffee and pure creative madness, sketching out what would become one of television's most unpredictable shows. But here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy was actually rejected by multiple networks before Fox finally took a chance on it. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that Peter Griffin didn't even have his signature chin dimple. That's right, the most recognizable feature of television's most chaotic dad was an afterthought added later in development. Speaking of Peter Griffin's design, here's a fact that will blow your mind every time you see him on screen. Seth MacFarlane has admitted that Peter's appearance was directly inspired by a security guard he encountered at his college. This unnamed hero of late-night campus safety became the visual foundation for a character who would go on to terrorize animated television for decades. Imagine being that security guard and randomly discovering years later that you're the face of one of America's most beloved cartoon disasters. But the real magic happens when you start digging into the voice acting secrets. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice the main characters, he performs Stewie, Brian, Peter, and several recurring characters, often having entire conversations with himself during recording sessions. The studio engineers have described these solo recording sessions as watching someone have the world's most entertaining mental breakdown. MacFarlane literally argues with himself, switches between character voices mid-sentence, and somehow maintains the distinct personality of each character flawlessly. Here's where things get really interesting from a production standpoint. The show's writers have a tradition called the random joke jar, where they collect the most absurd, context-free gags throughout the season. When they're stuck on an episode or need to fill time, they literally reach into this jar and randomly select bizarre scenarios to animate. This explains why you'll be watching a normal family dinner scene that suddenly cuts to a 3-minute sequence about a time-traveling sandwich. It's not lazy writing. It's intentionally chaotic creativity with a system behind the madness. The cutaway gags that make Family Guy so distinctive weren't originally planned to be such a huge part of the show. In early episodes, they used these random flashbacks sparingly, but when they noticed these moments got the biggest laughs and the most social media attention, they leaned into the format completely. Now, these seemingly random interruptions are carefully crafted to hit specific comedic beats and often take longer to animate than the main storyline of entire episodes. One of the most mind-bending facts involves the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Many A-list celebrities have appeared on Family Guy without most viewers ever realizing it because their characters are so obscure or brief. Drew Barrymore once voiced a background character who had exactly 3 words of dialogue spread across 2 episodes. The producers love casting major stars in tiny roles as inside jokes for the industry, creating this weird Hollywood treasure hunt for eagle-eyed fans. The character of Stewie Griffin underwent one of television's most subtle character evolutions. In early seasons, Stewie was genuinely intended to be an evil genius baby-plotting world domination. But as the show progressed, the writers began exploring his character's vulnerability and intelligence in different ways. The transition was so gradual that most viewers didn't consciously notice when Stewie evolved from potential supervillain to the show's emotional center and Brian's best friend. This character development happened organically through hundreds of small writing decisions across multiple seasons. Here's something that will change how you watch every Brian and Stewie episode. Their relationship was originally supposed to remain antagonistic throughout the series. The writers planned for Brian to be constantly annoyed by Stewie's schemes and intellectual pretensions. However, the voice acting chemistry between Seth MacFarlane's 2 characters was so natural and compelling that the writers began crafting episodes specifically around their friendship. Some of the show's most acclaimed episodes, including the time travel and multiverse adventures, exist purely because the Brian-Stewie dynamic became too interesting to ignore. The animation process for Family Guy involves secrets that most fans never consider. Each episode requires approximately 4 months from initial script to final animation. But here's the weird part. They often animate scenes completely out of order, based on character availability and studio scheduling. This means the emotional arc of an episode might be animated backwards, with the climactic scenes completed weeks before the setup scenes. The animators have to maintain character continuity and emotional consistency without seeing the full episode in sequence until the very end of production. Musical numbers in Family Guy aren't just random comedic choices. They serve a specific psychological function in the show's pacing. The writers discovered that musical sequences reset viewer attention spans and create natural breaks in the chaotic energy that defines most episodes. When you feel overwhelmed by rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags, a musical number gives your brain permission to reset and re-engage with the storyline. It's basically psychological manipulation disguised as entertainment, and it works perfectly. The show's relationship with censorship creates some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories. Family Guy pushes boundaries so consistently that the network has entire meetings dedicated to determining what crosses the line versus what's cleverly subversive. The writers have become experts at crafting jokes that technically comply with broadcast standards while still managing to be completely inappropriate. They've turned censorship navigation into its own art form, often making the censored versions of jokes funnier than the original uncensored concepts. Here's a fact that demonstrates the show's cultural impact in ways you might not expect. Family Guy references have been spotted in congressional hearings, Supreme Court footnotes, and international diplomatic communications. Politicians and legal scholars apparently watch the show and unconsciously incorporate its humor patterns into serious discourse. There's something simultaneously hilarious and terrifying about the idea that Stewie Griffin's speech patterns are influencing actual government policy discussions. The economics behind Family Guy reveal fascinating insights into modern television production. Each episode costs significantly more to produce than most people realize because of the sheer amount of custom animation required for cutaway gags. A single random flashback sequence might require creating entirely new character designs, backgrounds, and animation styles that will never be used again. The show essentially produces mini-movies within every episode, making it one of the most expensive animated series on television, despite its seemingly simple art style. Voice recording sessions for Family Guy episodes are legendary among industry professionals for their complete unpredictability. Seth MacFarlane often improvises entire scenes in character, creating alternate versions of jokes that the writers never conceived. Sometimes these improvised moments are so funny that entire episode plots get rewritten around a single spontaneous line delivery. The recording booth becomes this weird laboratory where cartoon characters take on lives of their own and influence their own storylines. The show's treatment of controversial topics follows a specific comedy philosophy that Seth MacFarlane has described as equal opportunity offense. The writing team maintains detailed charts tracking which groups, topics, and themes they've targeted to ensure their irreverence remains balanced across the political and social spectrum. This systematic approach to controversy means every offensive joke is part of a larger pattern designed to prevent the show from developing any consistent political agenda beyond general chaos. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, was actually conceived as a way to explore Family Guy's universe from a completely different perspective while maintaining the same comedic DNA. The failed experiment taught the creators valuable lessons about what makes Family Guy specifically work versus what elements translate to other formats. Cleveland's return to Family Guy brought with him subtle character changes informed by his solo series experience, creating this weird continuity where a character evolved through his own failed show. The internet age has transformed how Family Guy episodes are created and consumed. The writers now monitor social media reactions to episodes in real time and adjust future storylines based on which jokes generate the most memes and viral moments. This feedback loop means the show is constantly evolving to match internet culture while simultaneously influencing internet culture. It's become this weird, symbiotic relationship where the show and its online fan base co-create content together. Animation errors in Family Guy often become intentional running gags when fans notice and celebrate them online. The production team has learned to embrace happy accidents, sometimes deliberately recreating animation mistakes in future episodes as callbacks to their own imperfections. This self-aware approach to production errors creates additional layers of humor for dedicated fans while maintaining accessibility for casual viewers. The show's influence on other animated series is more extensive than most people realize. Writing techniques, character development approaches, and comedic timing patterns pioneered by Family Guy appear throughout modern animated television. Shows that seem completely different often use Family Guy's structural innovations adapted to their own specific styles and audiences. It's become the secret template for contemporary animated comedy without most viewers consciously recognizing the influence. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are probably working on next season's episodes, crafting new combinations of chaos and creativity that will eventually become someone else's late-night viewing experience. Family Guy continues to exist in this weird space between sophisticated entertainment and absolute nonsense, providing the perfect mental soundtrack for those moments when your brain needs something familiar yet unpredictable to focus on while the rest of the world sleeps. The show's legacy isn't just about the jokes or the characters. It's about proving that television audiences are capable of appreciating complexity disguised as simplicity, intelligence hidden within apparent randomness, and genuine emotional moments embedded in absolute chaos. Sweet dreams, and may your unconscious mind sort through all this delightful weirdness while you rest. Have you ever wondered what happens when your favorite animated characters don't just get blown up for laughs, but actually stay dead? Well, grab a cup of warm milk and get comfortable, because tonight we're diving deep into the surprisingly dark world of Family Guy's permanently deceased characters. And trust me, some of these deaths will shock you more than Peter's latest workplace accident. Now, before we start counting bodies, let's be real about something. Family Guy isn't exactly known for its restraint when it comes to cartoon violence. Characters get flattened, exploded, and dismembered on a weekly basis only to magically appear in the next scene like nothing happened. But every once in a while, the Grim Reaper actually keeps his receipts, and these characters never bounce back. Some were killed because fans couldn't stand them, others because their voice actors passed away in real life, and a few just got caught in the crossfire of Seth MacFarlane's twisted sense of humor. So dim those lights, settle into your most comfortable position, and let's explore every character that Family Guy has permanently sent to the great cartoon afterlife. Starting with the very first casualty that taught us this show wasn't messing around when it came to consequences. Our journey begins with Mr. Weed, Peter's original boss at the happy-go-lucky toy factory. This man first graced our screens way back in the pilot episode, catching Peter dead drunk at his workstation because apparently showing up sober was too much to ask. Mr. Weed was everything you'd expect from a factory supervisor dealing with Peter Griffin as an employee. Stern, professional, and probably questioning every career choice that led him to that moment. What made Mr. Weed fascinating wasn't just his no-nonsense attitude, but the running joke about his suspiciously theatrical mannerisms. The show never explicitly confirmed anything about his personal life, but his fabulous gestures and dramatic flair became a subtle recurring gag. Despite Peter's constant screw-ups, Mr. Weed kept giving him second chances, firing and rehiring him like it was some kind of workplace hobby. The irony is that this unusual loyalty to Peter ultimately sealed his fate. In the episode where everything went wrong, Peter decided to invite his boss over for dinner to make a good impression. Surprisingly, the evening started perfectly. Mr. Weed was genuinely impressed by Peter's home, family, and even Brian's ability to speak. He was so impressed that he offered Peter a promotion to head of toy development. That's when dinner took a deadly turn. Brian, shocked by this unexpected good news, started choking on a dinner roll. When Peter and Lois performed the Heimlich maneuver, the roll shot out of Brian's mouth like a projectile and landed directly in Mr. Weed's throat. And unlike the countless other times characters have faced mortal peril in this show, Mr. Weed actually died from choking. The funeral scene was classic Family Guy darkness. Mr. Weed left behind a videotaped will announcing that the happy-go-lucky toy factory would be demolished to make way for something called the homoerotic toy factory. It was absurd, tragic, and weirdly fitting for a character whose sexuality had been a running gag throughout his appearances. Moving from workplace fatalities to relationship drama, let's talk about Loretta Brown, Cleveland's ex-wife, who met her end in a way that perfectly summarized her entire character arc. Loretta was everything Cleveland wasn't. Where he was calm and soft-spoken, she was loud, demanding, and took no prisoners when it came to getting what she wanted. Their marriage started cracking when Quagmire's infamous inability to control himself led to an affair. During a fishing trip, a fish accidentally landed on Loretta's chest, and she took it as some kind of cosmic sign to sleep with the guy who caught it. Classic Family Guy logic, really. When Peter and Brian discovered this affair, they recognized Quagmire by his distinctive tattoo, leading to the most awkward revelation scene in television history. Cleveland's reaction to learning about the betrayal was so pathetically calm that it almost hurt to watch. Instead of rage or dramatic confrontation, he just apologized and accepted being kicked out of his own home. It wasn't until Peter and Lois called him out for being too passive that Cleveland finally found his spine and went after Quagmire. After their divorce was finalized, Loretta lived alone in a house on the hill, which sounds poetic until you remember this is Family Guy, and nothing stays peaceful for long. Her death came during one of Peter's elaborate pranks that somehow always managed to destroy Cleveland's property. This time, instead of Cleveland surviving the chaos like usual, Loretta got caught in the destruction and was crushed by falling debris. The reason behind Loretta's permanent exit was actually practical rather than narrative. Her voice actress, Alex Borstein, who also voices Lois, found Loretta's gravelly voice too difficult and painful to perform. Rather than recast the character, the writers decided to kill her off permanently, which honestly feels like the most Family Guy solution possible. Speaking of deaths that came out of nowhere, Horace's demise was particularly heartbreaking for fans of the Drunken Clam. This guy had been serving drinks to Peter, Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland since the early seasons, surviving multiple near-death experiences that should have killed any normal bartender. He'd been shot, knocked unconscious, and even survived a fire, leading viewers to believe he was practically immortal. His luck finally ran out during a softball game between the Drunken Clam and Goldman's Pharmacy. Jerome, brought in as a ringer for Mort's team, was at bat when Horace tried to strike him out. Instead of a strikeout, Horace got struck down permanently. The episode revealed his death so casually that it almost felt cruel. But that's exactly the kind of dark humor Family Guy specializes in. The aftermath was even more devastating. The Drunken Clam was set to close permanently, which would have destroyed one of the show's most important locations. Peter tried everything to save the bar, but it was Jerome himself, The man who accidentally killed Horace, who stepped up to buy the establishment and keep it running. It was a surprisingly touching resolution to a tragic situation. Now let's talk about Peter's father, or at least the man he thought was his father for most of his life. Francis Griffin was the embodiment of strict Irish Catholic values, taken to an uncomfortable extreme. His dislike of Lois simply because she was Protestant created constant family tension, and his general disappointment in Peter was palpable in every scene they shared. When Francis retired and moved in with the Griffin family, he transformed their home into what looked like a Catholic gift shop explosion. Crucifixes appeared in every room. Religious imagery covered the walls, and the atmosphere became so oppressive that Peter actually convinced the Pope to visit and talk some sense into his father. The fact that Francis accused the Pope of going soft tells you everything you need to know about his personality. Francis met his end during Meg's birthday party, which was already going poorly because Peter was, as usual, being a complete embarrassment. While attempting one of his signature stupid stunts, Peter accidentally caused an accident that put Francis in the hospital. On his deathbed, Francis had some final words for his son that were both cruel and oddly accurate. He called Peter a fat, stinking drunk, which honestly wasn't wrong, but the timing made it particularly harsh. The revelation that Francis wasn't even Peter's biological father came during therapy sessions afterward. Peter discovered his real father was an Irishman named Mickey McFinnigan, who only accepted Peter after he proved himself in a drinking contest. It was a twisted validation of everything Francis had criticized about Peter's character. Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin, also received the permanent death treatment, though her passing was handled with less dramatic flair. She died of a stroke at the beginning of an episode that quickly shifted focus to Peter getting involved with an older woman, which was weird timing even by Family Guy standards. Thelma had always been a complex character, technically nicer than Francis, but carrying her own set of serious problems. She was a smoker, gambler, and alcoholic who had created several traumatic childhood memories for Peter through her neglectful and sometimes abusive behavior. Her habit of dropping bombshells on Peter whenever she visited made every appearance feel like an emotional landmine. The most shocking revelation came when Peter needed his birth certificate and discovered he wasn't born in America but in Mexico. Thelma had gone there to terminate her pregnancy after learning Peter's real father was an Irish drunk, but changed her mind after giving birth and smuggled baby Peter back to the United States. She then married Francis to give Peter a father figure, creating the lie that lasted Peter's entire childhood. Moving into the realm of characters that almost nobody mourned, Doug's death was announced so casually that it felt like an afterthought. This preschool rival of Stewie's had been a thorn in the baby's side for multiple episodes, representing everything Stewie hated about other children his age. Their rivalry started over playground politics and escalated into full-scale warfare, complete with campaign strategies and political maneuvering when Doug ran unopposed for snack captain. Stewie's terror at the thought of Doug gaining any kind of political experience, even at the preschool level, led to some of the show's most absurd storylines involving toddler espionage and election fraud. The episode ended with Stewie wearing the snack captain hat and casually mentioning that Doug had died in a commuter plane crash that morning. The matter-of-fact delivery and complete lack of emotional response from anyone made it clear that Doug's death was meant to be darkly comedic rather than tragic. Fans were actually relieved to see the annoying character permanently removed from the show. Bertram's death was far more dramatic and tied into one of Family Guy's most science fiction-heavy storylines. As Stewie's artificially conceived half-brother, Bertram represented a legitimate threat to Stewie's intellectual supremacy and served as his most formidable opponent throughout multiple episodes. Their first encounter inside Peter's reproductive system established them as equals in terms of intelligence and ruthlessness. After forming a temporary alliance based on their mutual hatred of Lois, the two babies eventually turned on each other in a conflict that escalated beyond playground politics into actual warfare involving time travel and assassination attempts. Bertram's master plan involved traveling back in time to eliminate one of Stewie's ancestors, Leonardo da Vinci, thereby erasing Stewie from existence entirely. The fact that he actually succeeded in killing da Vinci showed just how dangerous and competent Bertram could be when properly motivated. However, Stewie proved to be the superior strategist by tracking Bertram down through time and ending their rivalry permanently. The execution scene, where Stewie asks Bertram about his favorite bottled water before killing him, demonstrated the cold calculation that made Stewie such a compelling character. Unlike Doug's casual disposal, Bertram's death felt earned through multiple episodes of build-up and character development. The double murder episode stands out as one of Family Guy's most ambitious attempts at sustained storytelling across a full episode length. The mystery dinner party format allowed the writers to eliminate multiple characters while providing entertainment value through the whodunit structure. Muriel Goldman's death during this episode felt particularly cruel because she had never been anything more than a background character who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As Mort's wife, she was essentially a female version of his neurotic personality, which made their relationship believable but didn't give her much individual characterization. The revelation that she had been exchanging mysterious messages with James Woods created false suspense about her potential involvement in the murders, but she was ultimately just another victim caught up in someone else's revenge scheme. Her funeral scene showed how little impact she had made on the community, with even her husband and son seeming relatively unaffected by her death. Diane Simmons represented the episode's true villain and most shocking revelation. As Tom Tucker's longtime co-anchor, she had been a background presence for years without showing any signs of homicidal tendencies. Her transformation from professional newswoman to calculating murderer demonstrated how deeply personal rejections and professional disappointments could push someone over the edge. The motive behind her killing spree was painfully relatable in its pettiness. Being dumped by James Woods for a younger woman and facing replacement by a younger co-anchor as she turned 40 created the perfect storm of humiliation and desperation. Her methodical approach to framing Tom Tucker for the murders showed intelligence and planning that made her genuinely dangerous. Diane's final confrontation with Lois provided the classic villain monologue moment where all her motivations were revealed. The irony of being killed by Stewie, a baby, after successfully eliminating multiple adult targets added the kind of dark humor that Family Guy specialized in creating. Patty Tanager's death was perhaps the most satisfying for viewers who had endured his annoying catchphrase and constant attempts to start fights over nothing. This short, aggressive man represented everything irritating about people who create drama where none needs to exist. His role as the boss of a car dealership where Brian worked temporarily showed that his obnoxious personality wasn't limited to casual encounters. Even in professional settings, he couldn't resist making inappropriate comments and stirring up unnecessary conflict with his employees and customers. The poetic justice of his death came when he tried to start a fight with someone operating a military tank. His final words, maintaining his catchphrase even while facing certain doom, showed that he was committed to his obnoxious personality right until the end. The audience's reaction to his death was overwhelmingly positive, proving that sometimes characters are specifically designed to be eliminated. The deaths of Angela and Mayor Adam West carried more emotional weight because they were tied to the real-life passing of their voice actors. These weren't creative decisions made for storyline purposes, but necessary responses to losing the talented people who brought these characters to life. Angela's character arc, from hostile supervisor to lonely woman seeking connection, provided some of Peter's most uncomfortable workplace storylines. Her sexual harassment of Peter while threatening his job security created situations that were both comedically awkward and genuinely problematic by today's standards. Her backstory, revealing years of loneliness and isolation, made her desperate actions more understandable without excusing them. The resolution where Peter dresses up to take her on a fake date showed his capacity for kindness even when dealing with someone who had made his life difficult. Carrie Fisher's death in real life meant that Angela's character had to be written out permanently. The funeral scene in her honor served as both a farewell to the character and a tribute to the actress who had voiced her. Peter's mistake of ending up at the wrong funeral added typical Family Guy humor to what was otherwise a genuinely touching moment. Mayor Adam West's death marked the end of one of the show's most beloved recurring characters. His wonderfully insane personality and possibly corrupt political practices had provided countless moments of absurd humor throughout his long tenure as Quahog's mayor. The real Adam West's connection to his animated counterpart made the character feel more authentic and grounded despite his completely unrealistic behavior and dialogue. His brief challenge from Lois during her political phase showed that even incompetent leadership was preferable to the corruption that inevitably followed. His marriage to Carol Pewterschmidt, Lois's sister, created additional family connections that made his death more personally impactful for the main characters. The tribute episode where Brian petitioned to rename the high school after Mayor West provided proper closure for a character who had been part of the show's fabric for over 16 seasons. The ghost appearance at the end where Mayor West saves Brian from falling off a cliff gave the character one final moment of heroism and showed that death couldn't completely remove him from the Family Guy universe. His replacement by Wild West as mayor acknowledged that the character was irreplaceable while allowing the show to continue. These permanent deaths in Family Guy serve multiple purposes beyond simple shock value. They demonstrate that actions can have genuine consequences, even in a cartoon universe known for its resurrection-running gags. Some characters were eliminated because they had served their narrative purpose, others because fan reaction made their continued presence counterproductive, and some because real-world circumstances forced the writer's hands. The variety in how these deaths were handled shows the range of Family Guy's storytelling capabilities. From casual mentions that treat death as an afterthought to elaborate murder mystery episodes that build tension across an entire episode, the show has found multiple ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature dark humor. The emotional impact of these deaths varies significantly based on character development and audience attachment. Long-running characters like Mayor West and Horace created genuine sadness among fans, while annoying characters like Doug and Patty Tanager were celebrated in their passing. This range of reactions demonstrates how effectively the show had developed distinct personalities for even its minor recurring characters. What makes these permanent deaths particularly interesting is how they contrast with Family Guy's usual approach to cartoon violence. The show regularly features deaths that are immediately reversed or ignored, making the permanent ones stand out as genuinely significant events. When a character stays dead in this universe, it carries extra weight, because viewers know it's not the norm. The practical reasons behind some of these deaths, such as voice actor availability or fan reaction, show how external factors can influence creative decisions in long-running animated series. The writers have generally handled these necessary eliminations with appropriate respect while maintaining the show's comedic tone. Looking back at this collection of permanently deceased characters reveals the evolution of Family Guy's storytelling over its many seasons. Earlier deaths, like Mr. Weed, were often accidental consequences of the show's chaotic humor, while later deaths, like those in the murder mystery episode, showed more deliberate narrative planning. The show's willingness to permanently eliminate characters demonstrates confidence in its ability to create new sources of humor and conflict without relying on the same recurring personalities indefinitely. This creative flexibility has helped Family Guy maintain freshness across its extended run, while still honoring the contributions of departed characters. These deaths also serve as reminders that even in the most outrageous fictional universes, some actions cannot be undone. They provide moments of genuine consequence in a show that otherwise operates on cartoon logic, where nothing permanent ever happens to the main characters. So there you have it, fellow insomniacs and Family Guy enthusiasts. A complete tour through the surprisingly extensive graveyard of characters who didn't make it back from their final Family Guy appearances. From workplace accidents to murder mysteries, from natural causes to tank-related incidents, the show has found creative ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature blend of dark humor and unexpected heart. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, even cartoon death can sometimes be permanent. Hey there, sleep seekers and Family Guy fans. Ever lie awake wondering just how many ridiculous jobs Peter Griffin has actually had throughout the series? Well, grab your pillow and get comfortable, because we're about to dive into the wonderfully chaotic career history of Quahog's most incompetent resident. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, Peter's resume reads like a fever dream, and tonight we're exploring every single bizarre position this man has somehow managed to stumble into. Picture this. You're at a job interview, and they ask where you see yourself in 5 years. Most people have a reasonable answer. Peter Griffin? Well, let's just say his interview skills are about as polished as his decision-making abilities. Yet somehow, this man has held more jobs than most people even know exist. Tonight's journey through Peter's professional mishaps is perfect for those late-night moments when you need something absurdly entertaining to drift off to. Let's start with what might be considered Peter's most stable employment, though that's not saying much. His original gig as a safety inspector at the happy-go-lucky toy factory sounds straightforward enough. Stand around, inspect toys, make sure they're safe for children. Simple, right? Wrong. This is Peter Griffin we're talking about. Even the most basic task becomes an opportunity for spectacular failure. The man whose job it was to ensure toy safety somehow found ways to make everything less safe just by being there. From toy inspection, Peter moved on to what became his longest-running employment adventure, working at the Pawtucket Brewery. Now, there's something almost poetic about Peter working at the place where his beloved Pawtucket Patriot Ale is crafted. It's like a beer enthusiast getting a job at their favorite brewery, except instead of bringing passion and expertise to the role, Peter brought his unique talent for turning any situation into chaos. On his very first day, he managed to get drunk during work hours, setting the tone for what would become years of questionable workplace behavior. The medical field has also been graced by Peter's presence, though patients probably weren't thrilled about it. During a citywide flu outbreak, when the hospital was desperately short-staffed, Peter volunteered as a nurse. This might seem noble until you discover his approach to medical care. Turns out, Peter had been faking his way through nursing duties because he was afraid of needles. Imagine being sick in the hospital and finding out your nurse has been pretending to give you medication because he's squeamish about basic medical equipment. But Peter's medical career didn't end with nursing. He somehow also worked as a doctor, which raises serious questions about the hospital's hiring practices. His approach to emergency medicine was about as effective as you'd expect. When someone's life hung in the balance, Peter's solution involved methods that would make actual medical professionals question their career choices. Law enforcement has also experienced the Peter Griffin effect. In one memorable stint, he became a sheriff in a small southern town after the Griffin family was relocated by the FBI. The job description perfectly matched Peter's skill set: hang out, eat pie, and get drunk. For once, Peter had found employment that aligned with his natural abilities. Of course, even the simplest law enforcement duties became complicated when filtered through Peter's unique worldview. His artistic side emerged when he worked as a police sketch artist. While most people struggled with Peter's unconventional artistic interpretations, his sketches turned out to be surprisingly accurate. Sometimes, raw talent manifests in the most unexpected ways, even when that talent belongs to someone who approaches every task with the subtlety of a freight train. Peter has also dabbled in hospitality, working as a motel housekeeper. His customer service approach involved inserting himself into situations where he absolutely wasn't welcome, demonstrating a complete lack of understanding about personal boundaries and professional behavior. Guests probably didn't expect their housekeeper to become an active participant in their private moments. The detective business got a taste of Peter's investigative skills when he worked as a private investigator. His noir-style internal monologue painted him as a hard-boiled detective struggling to make ends meet, but his actual investigative methods were about as sophisticated as his approach to everything else. Still, there's something charming about Peter's attempt to channel classic detective fiction, even if the execution left much to be desired. Peter's relationship with food has led to several career opportunities. He became president of the National Association for the Advancement of Fat People, turning his personal struggles with weight into a leadership role. This position actually led to some heroic moments, proving that even Peter's most self-serving endeavors can occasionally produce positive outcomes. The fishing industry experienced Peter's unique management style when he decided to become a professional fisherman. Despite having zero experience on the water, Peter approached commercial fishing with his characteristic confidence. His nautical adventures proved that enthusiasm alone isn't enough to master the complexities of maritime work, especially when that enthusiasm is accompanied by a complete lack of relevant skills. Agriculture also felt Peter's impact when he tried his hand at farming. Moving the family to the countryside for a simpler life seemed like a reasonable plan until reality set in. Farming requires knowledge, patience, and hard work, qualities that don't align with Peter's approach to life. The fact that they failed to grow a single sellable crop shouldn't surprise anyone familiar with Peter's track record. Education has been both blessed and cursed by Peter's involvement. He served as an interim principal at James Woods High, stepping in during a staffing crisis. While his administrative methods were unconventional, he did manage some positive moments, like standing up to bullies. However, his interpretation of appropriate principal behavior included outdated social media challenges and questionable disciplinary approaches. Peter also won a campaign to become school board president, though his victory came through a smear campaign against his own wife. His tenure in educational leadership was marked by the same chaos that characterizes all his endeavors, proving that putting Peter in charge of anything, especially children's education, requires a level of optimism that borders on delusion. The restaurant business has provided Peter with multiple opportunities to combine his love of food with his entrepreneurial spirit. He and Lois opened Big Pete's House of Munch, using money from a valuable coin they discovered. Restaurant ownership taught Peter that loving food and successfully serving it to customers are entirely different skills. The establishment struggled from day one, with Peter's customer service philosophy clashing with basic business principles. Not content with traditional restaurants, Peter also operated a food truck called Eat My Junk. His mobile food service brought his unique culinary vision directly to the streets, complete with creative payment processing methods that probably violated several health and business regulations. The food truck experiment demonstrated that changing venues doesn't necessarily improve outcomes when the fundamental approach remains chaotic. Environmental activism became Peter's focus when he created Gary, the no-trash cougar, a character designed to combat pollution. His environmental education methods were somewhat traumatic for young audiences, proving that good intentions don't automatically translate to effective execution. Sometimes the message gets lost when the messenger approaches their mission with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Law enforcement experienced Peter's unique perspective again when he volunteered as a cop during a staffing shortage. Giving Peter police powers was probably one of Quahog's more questionable decisions. His interpretation of police work involved creative approaches to evidence handling and suspect interaction that would make actual officers reconsider their career choices. Corporate leadership has also been shaped by Peter's influence. When he temporarily took over as CEO of his father-in-law's company, his business philosophy involved firing experienced executives and replacing them with his drinking buddies. His product development ideas were equally revolutionary, though perhaps not in ways that traditional business schools would recommend. The tobacco industry briefly benefited from Peter's advocacy when he served as president of El Dorado Cigarette Company. His approach to corporate leadership in this role was refreshingly straightforward. Show up, sit in the office, and use his position to influence legislation. Sometimes the simplest job descriptions are the most honest. Political service has called upon Peter's talents multiple times. He worked as a press secretary, though his duties seemed to focus more on preventing static electricity than managing media relations. His understanding of political communication was about as nuanced as his approach to everything else, which is to say, not very nuanced at all. The entertainment industry has provided Peter with various opportunities to showcase his talents. He worked as a Calvin Klein model at some point in his past, proving that even Peter's physical appearance has commercial value under the right circumstances. He's also appeared in television commercials, though his performance skills might not lead to repeat bookings. Military service appears somewhere in Peter's background, though his understanding of combat protocols and chain of command was typically unconventional. His military training focused on identifying friendly forces, a concept he struggled to grasp despite repeated instruction. Telecommunications offered Peter work in telemarketing, though his target demographic was somewhat specialized. His phone skills were about as effective as you'd expect, with customer interaction following his usual pattern of creating confusion where none previously existed. Medical experimentation provided Peter with income opportunities when he volunteered for various research studies. The compensation was decent, though the side effects of participating in multiple experiments simultaneously probably weren't covered in the consent forms he definitely didn't read carefully. The hospitality industry experienced Peter's customer service philosophy when he worked various service positions. His approach to taking orders involved creative interpretations of restaurant terminology that probably confused both customers and kitchen staff. His ability to remember and accurately communicate simple requests was challenged by his tendency to overcomplicate straightforward interactions. Emergency services have been both helped and hindered by Peter's involvement. His stint as a firefighter demonstrated that good intentions and basic safety training don't always combine effectively. Sometimes the person meant to solve the problem becomes part of the problem, especially when that person approaches emergency response with Peter's unique logic. Entertainment production has benefited from Peter's creative vision. He developed television programming with the same innovative approach he brings to everything else. His understanding of audience preferences and production logistics was typically unconventional, resulting in content that probably challenged viewers' expectations in unexpected ways. Transportation services experienced Peter's customer service approach when he worked as an Uber driver. His vehicle, the situation was unconventional, and his interpersonal skills with passengers followed his established pattern of creating memorable experiences for all the wrong reasons. The pharmaceutical industry relied on Peter's expertise when he worked as a pharmacist. His approach to medication distribution and patient consultation demonstrated his unique interpretation of healthcare delivery. Customers probably received more than they bargained for in terms of personalized service. Seasonal employment has provided Peter with opportunities to spread joy as a mall Santa. His interaction with children during the holiday season showcased his gift for making lasting impressions, though not necessarily the kind that parents hope for when they bring their kids to meet Santa. Domestic management became Peter's responsibility when he worked as a house husband. His approach to household organization and family care demonstrated skills that had been hidden beneath years of workplace chaos. Sometimes the right job brings out unexpected competencies, even in the most unlikely candidates. Judicial service elevated Peter to the Supreme Court, where his legal philosophy focused on equality through unconventional means. His approach to constitutional interpretation was characteristically innovative, challenging traditional legal thinking with solutions that probably weren't covered in law school. Specialized services have utilized Peter's unique skill set in various capacities. He's worked as everything from a babysitter to a personal shopper, bringing his distinctive approach to customer service in roles that required sensitivity and attention to detail. His clients probably received more personalized attention than they anticipated. Performance arts have provided Peter with outlets for his creative expression. His musical abilities have earned him income through various venues, from street performance to wedding entertainment. His understanding of audience engagement and musical technique follows his established pattern of prioritizing enthusiasm over conventional skill. The food service industry has experienced Peter's influence in multiple capacities, from restaurant ownership to catering services. His culinary philosophy emphasizes creativity over convention, resulting in dining experiences that challenge customers' expectations about food preparation and presentation. Public safety has relied on Peter's expertise in various specialized roles, from ninja police officer to volunteer emergency responder. His approach to crime prevention and emergency management demonstrates innovative thinking that probably wasn't covered in standard training programs. Media production has benefited from Peter's creative vision in multiple formats, from cartoon development to television production. His understanding of entertainment value and audience engagement follows his characteristic approach of prioritizing memorable experiences over conventional quality standards. As we wrap up this extensive journey through Peter Griffin's career history, it's clear that his professional life has been anything but boring. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, from nurse to ninja cop, Peter has approached every job with the same combination of enthusiasm and chaos that defines his character. His work history reads like a collection of workplace disasters, yet somehow he keeps finding new employment opportunities. What makes Peter's career journey so entertaining is his complete lack of awareness about his own limitations. He approaches brain surgery with the same confidence he brings to flipping burgers, and somehow manages to create memorable moments in every position he holds. His employers probably don't forget him quickly, though not necessarily for the reasons they'd prefer. The sheer variety of Peter's employment history suggests either an incredibly diverse skill set or an amazing ability to convince people to hire him, despite obvious red flags. The truth is probably somewhere in between, though the evidence strongly suggests that Peter's interview skills don't accurately represent his job performance capabilities. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can rest easy knowing that somewhere in the animated universe, Peter Griffin is probably starting a new job tomorrow, bringing his unique brand of workplace creativity to yet another unsuspecting industry. His career adventures remind us that sometimes the most entertaining stories come from the most unlikely sources, and that competence isn't always required for memorable employment experiences. Sweet dreams, and remember, no matter how chaotic your own work life gets, it's probably more manageable than Peter Griffin's professional journey through the working world of Quahog and beyond.